So today we're talking about God's will. Most importantly, like why you should follow it. So yeah, let's get into it. So when I always think of God's will, it reminds me of Jonah, and the whale. I don't know if you know the story, but basically, God told him to go to Nineveh. This place where a lot of people were doing a lot of bad things. And then he's like, no. And he went the other way. Well, he got on a ship with people. Then a storm started happening, and it started, it was going to capsize the boat basically and kill everyone. He told the crew, and he's like, well, I'm running away from God. And all of them were like, okay, well, you're going to the sea. He volunteered to jump in the sea, but he still jumped in the sea, got swallowed by a whale. After that, he's like, God, if you get me out of here, then I will go to Nineveh and preach about you. And then God got him out of there, and he went to go preach to Nineveh. But the moral of the story is that God's will is the perfect will, but also that what he says is going to happen. He told him that he's going to go to Nineveh and do those things. And, well, it did happen. And like God's really been dealing with me is that you got to plant your seed. God can tell you his will, but, and he says like, oh, I'm going to, increase your harvest tenfold, hundredfold, billionfold, but you got to be willing to plant the seed. The seed ain't just going to, grow out of your hand or in your pocket. You got to plant it. And, God can provide all the rain, the sun, like all the conditions. But if you don't trust him to plant the seed in the first place, to believe in God and honor God, then he can't work, So you got to really plant your seed. If God tells you to upload a YouTube video, then you better ding dong upload, because God told me a lot of things about what I'm supposed to do. And one of those things is uploading every single day on here. Now, obviously, if you're looking at my channel, you can tell that I have not been doing that. But it changes today, okay, because I'm tired of having the adversity that I've been having. Really get into it. God's will for my life. God's will is for me to be a pastor, that I am a pastor, which I already am. But to speak online as well as the podium, to reach people. I've been afraid to speak because my views on the world, like I'm not trying to say, oh, like, man, like my views are so controversial or anything. I'm just trying to say that, like, if I speak, I was afraid that if I spoke, when I'm called to speak, that I'd get canceled or whatever, and people wouldn't listen to me or whatever else. But I can't decide that before, people actually hear me, So I got to actually preach what God's calling me to preach. The moral of the story is that my bank account is now zero. You don't need to worry about that, but I was just telling you that, like you got to follow God. Basically every other job that I've applied for, they haven't gotten back to me. Crazy, it's almost like I'm not following the will of God, because God told me that I'm supposed to, be doing the online stuff and preaching, that's what I'm mainly called to do, and if I'm not following him, then like, how can he bless me? How can he bless, So anyway, and that includes my body, and everything else. So, you got to honor God. Like, I'm not trying to, be like, oh man, like I'm poor, like I am, but I'm not trying to say that. Anyway, so, loving people. And like, these are the most important things in life. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. Second, only that is love your neighbor as yourself. Those are the main things that we're supposed to do. Now, if you love God, then you'll trust in him, and do his will for our lives. Because let me tell you, the most adversity that I've faced in my life has been in the past 4 years. Ever since I've gone to college, ever since I've gotten out of college, it's been the most adversity. College, it was stressful, and I couldn't focus on my YouTube stuff. I just became lazy, got like obese, basically. You should have seen me a year ago. I was 213, now I'm 158. Great change. It was God. But basically what I'm trying to get at is that God makes a way every single time. And that, God told me before then that I was going to be fully restored. Now, I'm not all the way restored yet. Okay, there's still things he's working on, still things that are healing. But, it's way better than it was a year ago. And I'm going to trust in him, So I just got to trust in, that God's going to make a way. So, and I'm not going to preach on things unless God tells me to. You got to be led by God. So it reminds me of Abraham. Remember Abraham? If you didn't know, he was called the father of many nations by God. He basically was the main person that started the Jews, basically. So anyway, God came to him and Martha, which they were really old at the time, or at least in today's standards. They're like 90 something, I think. Anyway, so, he told them that they were going to have a child or children, and he was going to be the father of many nations. And, Abraham at the time, he was just like, he started laughing. He was like, hilarious. Like he was laughing at God, but God shut him up, right then, because that's, like he was going to mess up what God had planned. So you gotta trust in God. and believe what he's saying. So, it wasn't until the time that the child was born that God undid his, mutism, he muted him to let him speak. So what really, like, God's will is the truth. You got to trust in God. What God says is, and that's what you got to really realize, and you got to trust in God. I'm trusting in God now, that I believe that, when I'm uploading every single day, that he's going to make a way for me, for people to see. I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm amazing or anything. I'm just trying to say that, like, I've lived a life about God. I want people to know God, that he loves us, he's for us, that, like, when I've been in the world, like in these past, almost a year now, I've been graduated. If I've learned anything, it's that life is like sinking sand. The world is like sinking sand. It tells us this in the Bible too, that God is the only rock, that we got to trust in him, that we got to put our foundation on God. Because if we put it on other things, let me tell you, let's say I put it on my job, but the CEO tomorrow is like, oh, well, I'm going to fire like half my population, like Elon Musk, Well, then what happens? Well, you're unemployed. Your foundation is gone. You've sunk into the sand. So, you got to trust in God in all these things and love people. Like, and I was dealing with this today too. I'm getting on tangents, going everywhere, but let me just get to it. So, I was seeing this person. They were in a wheelchair. They were wheeling down the street. It was like we got the loop. Like we got like the access road. Where it's on like an elevated service, and then we have a road down here. Well, this person was on that road, like on the right. So basically, like on the sidewalk with a wheelchair, but they're going backwards for some reason. I don't know why. But it was like an older grandma, and I saw her when I was on the loop. When I was on the elevated surface. Anyway, so I go over there. Like I turn around, get off and go over there. And then, when I'm driving by, because I was like, man, if I'm really a Christian, then I should go over there and help people, like, and, like we should want to help people. We should love people as we love ourselves. And, it tells us, that to love our neighbors ourselves. Well, if we really loved our neighbors ourselves, when somebody asks us for money, we'd give half of all we have because we love them as much as us. Isn't that true? It's crazy because I don't think anyone does that. But I'm just saying, So, and I go over there, and I slow down, but then I realized cars were behind me, so I had to go anyway. And I didn't tell her that, like, are you okay or whatever. So, I was feeling bad about that when I was going home. I was like, man, am I really about God if I'm not stopping, if I'm not helping people, if I'm not loving people as the way I should, and I repented to God, and God said, I forgive you. He's gonna make a way for me to grow, because eventually I want to be where I'll stop. I'll get out. I'll go over there and see, like, how you doing? Is everything okay? Because we should love our neighbors as ourselves. Really, what I found is that most people in the church, I'm not trying to generalize, but I'm generally in my church, a lot of people will, like, they won't stop. And I guess I'm the same way, which kind of sucks. I don't want to be this way, but, we're changing. We're getting better. Okay? Most people won't stop. We gotta love people as ourselves. When people are struggling, when people look different, when they look weird, we gotta love people. If that's what it's about, And that's what God's will is for our lives, to love people with all our hearts, to love God with all our hearts, all our mind, all our strength. Secondly is that to love our neighbors ourselves. So be following God, love people, and realize that when God says something, it's going to happen. And also plant your seed. Don't be afraid, because what God says will come to pass, So just put your faith in God. Don't put your faith in the world, because it's literally going to crumble. We're in a recession right now, like everyone's losing their job. My grandma's losing her job, like everyone and their dog, So you got to trust in God. It tells us in the Bible, seek first the kingdom of God and all will be added unto you. So that means if you seek God, nothing will he withhold from you. That you'll be in full blessing. Better than you were before. Way better than you were before, So you just got to trust in him. But yeah, with that said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a fun time, and I'm out.